No tasty jams tonight. The little one's hopefully asleep upstairs. Give everybody another minute or two to jump in. That wants to jump in. I know a lot of people watch this stuff later, so I'm not going to be like too precious about that. All right, I'm going to start with football because I think that's the sort of the first topic. Then we'll jump into basketball. There's a little more time to think about that as we go along. But thanks everyone for joining me. It's been kind of an interesting 96 hours, whatever it is, since the football game at Wake Forest. Obviously, Georgia Tech went in there and really kind of kicked the Deacs around for most of that game. I think a lot of people weren't expecting that. I think that they were due for a better performance, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's what you saw on Saturday. They were pretty inspired to play. I think that, when you look at the way they came after him, had a good game plan, moving Micaiah Scott out to defensive end, pretty much for a big chunk of the game, playing, times with like Zeke and Jason Moore or Daquan or Horace Lockett, just going real big up front. And then at times also going smaller with Kevin Harris and Kyle Kennard. Kyle Kennard had a tremendous game. Obviously one of the best defensive pass rushing games in a long time at Georgia Tech. So that was very cool to see. And I'm excited to see it. Wake Forest, it's interesting. They have a veteran offensive line and they didn't look like it. And that was sort of one of my concerns going into that game, was that I wasn't sure how that would work. The long mesh tends to mess people up, and they compressed the pocket on them and got in Mitch Griffiths' grill and gave him a hard time, and they played really poorly. It was funny. My counterpart, Connor O'Neill, who works for the Wake Forest site that I used to run, and he replaced me when I stepped away. And Connor thought this was going to be some sort of shootout, and that Wake's defensive line was going to get all these sacks because they had sacked Old Dominion so many times. I just didn't see that. Like, I thought at best it was going to be I thought it would be a close game probably, and it would not be as high scoring as he did. And the reality was Georgia Tech should have scored 38 points in a game and scored 30 because they had to settle for 2 field goals in the red zone, and all their other touchdowns were actually longer out of the red zone touchdowns, which was kind of a weird fluke thing. Good to see Aiden Burke kicking the ball really well. Good to see David Shanahan kind of back at it. I thought it was really impressive with Burr too. It was raining, like it was a contaminated surface, not where he's used to kicking, and came out and looked great. And his long field goal would have been good for another 7 yards probably. So that was excellent to see. It was 48 yards, longest kick since 2018. They're doing a lot of things now that haven't been done since 2018, and hopefully that bodes well going to a bowl game, right? That's the last time Georgia Tech went to a bowl game. I can't believe I'm even saying that. And it was funny. I was just booking all of my travel for hoops in case I do end up going to most of the games, except for the Hawaii tournament in Cincinnati, because those don't work. But I was thinking about, I may have to change some of these around if there's a bowl game. So, I'm hopeful that they will break that. As someone that covers the program, I'd be really excited to see Georgia Tech hit the bowl and the bowl drought. That's pretty much entirely self-inflicted. So I would be very pleased to cover a bowl game in December or January, even for that matter. Kind of moving off of Wake, I don't know there's a lot to say about it. I thought that, Miles Sims and Kenan Johnson kind of redeemed themselves a little bit with their play in the game. Jalen King and CP Lee definitely played a lot better. They seem more consistent playing the whole game. Miles kind of came in as the dime DB. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look to see where exactly he was playing. I think he might have been just playing deep free safety. But um, it worked. Their plan worked, you know, and you got a lot of guys still banged up, and that's the thing that people you don't realize. They played that entire game with one of their starting receivers out. Well, actually, both their starting receivers didn't play in the game. Chase Lane and Dominic Blaylock, the guys that started early this season. They played without their starting right tackle for all but 3 snaps. They played without their best defensive end on paper going into the season in Sylvain Yondigen. That's a lot of guys to be out, and so I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing. Like I'm very encouraged by the fact that they're deep enough to adjust. You know, Jakaya Leftwich steps in. There's no drop off. I feel like across the line they have some pretty solid depth right now, and I think that's been pretty big about it. So looking at Bowling Green, I'm not a Scott Loeffler guy. I know Brent gave him a lot of praise. I always thought he was kind of a mediocre offensive coordinator throughout his various stops at the Virginia schools and in the ACC. They're okay. You know, are they as good as some of the other MAC teams Georgia Tech's played? I don't know. I haven't watched much Bowling Green. I watched a little bit of that Michigan game, and you know, they were a bowl team last year, and what I thought was a little bit of a down MAC year. This is a game that I feel like they should win comfortably, and these are the games that Tech fans need to stop worrying about. Like this is going to be the delineation to me between this era and between the previous era and Brent Key's era. They are physically superior pretty much across the board. You know, save maybe 1 or 2 spots. Win the game, win it comfortably, control it, get your fans into the game, put on a good show, rest some guys if you can, because you got Miami next week who's on a bye right now, and they're undefeated and going to be hyped out of their mind. They haven't been knocked down yet the way that the Canes usually are at this point in the season. So I think that you really want to see the team take care of business and make it about Georgia Tech this week and not about necessarily Bowling Green. And I think Brent does a great job of that. They reset themselves after the disappointing game at Ole Miss and played really well. And he had challenged the team too, which I thought was pretty cool. I think it's going to be real interesting to see how that all plays out. But I'll look and see what football questions I have, and then we'll dive into basketball in a minute. How do you think Brent Key is addressing the team with the possible trap game syndrome with Bowling Green? Do you might think it might take him a half to realize Bowling Green is there to win a big upset? I don't think Georgia Tech's in a position to be taking advantage of anybody. If they didn't sleepwalk through the South Carolina State game, I don't think they're going to sleepwalk through this one. So I'm not concerned about that. Plus, they haven't been at home again playing a real opponent, an FBS opponent. South Carolina State was like a few hairs above like some Metro Atlanta high school teams. Like they were not good. So, you know, really, other than the option giving them some cheap points, not cheap, but points they wouldn't have gotten run a different offense. I think that, you know, that's not a good team. So I think this is going to be a little bit better of a measuring stick, just in taking care of business. Now 1 year from when he took over, how would you grade Brent Key so far in the different aspects of his job? Also, what is one stupid thing about Jeff Collins you haven't told us yet? And in honor of the anniversary of Jeff Collins' termination, I'm trying to think if there's a good Jeff Collins story I haven't told yet on here or on the board. I told the story last week, I think, of how they took down the Miracle in Techwood stuff and how he was very opposed to having anything from the Paul Johnson era. I'm trying to think if there's any other good ones off the top of my head that I haven't heard or haven't shared with you guys that I've heard. I'll say this. I was like, there's a giant sense of relief from everyone involved to not deal with that dude anymore. It's one of the weirdest things about Jeff is he used to have a miniature Darth Vader candy jar that he kept. And during COVID, we did all our media avails like outside of his office in the stadium in the north end zone. And there's like a little, you always see it as like the rooms with the double glass and all that on the terrace in the north end zone. And he had this little thing like Darth Vader like a little Darth Vader pumpkin, for lack of a better, but it was actually like a Darth Vader thing because he's a Star Wars nerd. And it always had like really old candy in it. And he would put it out as like an offering to the media. It always seemed weird to me because it was all like kind of melted and gnarly. And then he'd be like all offended if we wouldn't take candy from it. And I just always thought that was kind of strange because it wasn't like it was like fresh candy. It was like, here's my leftover crap. Would you like some? So um, that's a Jeff Collins thing that's kind of weird. What was the difference on the defensive side of the ball in the Wake Forest game? Was it more schematic, effort, talent, etc.? I think the Wake Forest game was them executing and having a game plan that the guys believed in and went out and executed it. I don't think it was anything special. They were smart to squeeze the pocket and be aggressive that way and not be reactive. Too many teams react to the or spy the long mesh, and I think when you spy it, and I've watched a lot of teams play Wake Forest because obviously I sort of covered them from a distance for a long time. So did Russell, and we'd watch these games, and these teams would kind of spy these guys. And really, after Jamie Newman, they didn't have Sam Hartman was going to take off and run a lot. He ran probably less than Haynes King does, and so it made no sense to me to like spy that guy. And you were better off just sending that guy in. And there were a couple of plays Ed pointed out in his breakdown where, like Dre White knew exactly what to do. The running back stayed home and he blitzed, and they disrupted things. And I think those are the things that you're missing a little bit. The linebacker play is a little less instinctual right now. You have Paul Maiola, who started his career as a safety, who's a weak side linebacker playing Mike at times. You have Trinelius Tatum, who's a guy who hasn't really shown it. He's put it all together yet, playing on that weak side. And the defense looks better whenever they switch that out and they play Eford or White at the Mike or even Braylon Oliver, and they play Maiola at the weak side. And maybe that's what they're going to do going forward. They keep trying Tatum, and it's just not working for whatever reason. And I think he's probably the next guy that's going to be shifted out of the rotation a little bit if he can't get it together. Do you have any injury updates other than what Key mentioned about Dante at the press conference today? I heard Williams was back and possibly available this week. I'd like to keep him out if they don't need him. Any word on Blaylock or Harvey? What kept him out last week? Amari Harvey was available in the last game and was dressed out and had his helmet. He was like an emergency corner. Blaylock was dressed and available. I think he's just banged up. Probably would like to save him if they can. Jordan Williams, I think, just has like the same injury and keeps re-injuring it. And I think I agree with you that they probably would be best if they can get through a game with Ja'Kai Leftwich and give him, basically 2 weeks off here to kind of heal up a little bit. Other than those guys on injuries, I'm trying to think. Chase Lane was in his shirt at the game. I still think he's maybe like the Miami game when you see him. I'm not sure they're going to try him out here this week, but I don't know anything specifically about that yet. So it'll be interesting to see like what they do. Obviously, Avery Boyd played a lot of the X last week, and they had Singleton at the Z. We start to see like some James Blackstrain guy, DJ Moore, who's back from his wrist injury. Like those guys start to play more, maybe. So, personally, I'd like to see a little bit of those guys. Don't need to wear, I think, Singleton out playing Bowling Green, hopefully. So I hope to see a little bit more of those guys last week. Has Corey Robinson shown progress in practice over the last couple of weeks? Do you think we'll see him on Saturday? If Georgia Tech has a comfortable lane, I'm rooting for him. I think he has good football ahead of him in the coming years. I don't think they've written off Corey Robinson at all. I think he just played poorly. And Ethan McKinney is a guy they had intended from day one of like fall camp when they saw him to play him. And Ethan just is really talented as a freshman. And Brent's a guy who played as a true freshman and knows what it's like on that position and offensive line. And they want to get that guy some reps, and it makes sense to play him. I think Corey will play some, and I doubt, I'll knock on wood here, but like, I don't know that you're going to play a whole season with a freshman left tackle. So I think you're going to need Corey at some point. I'm not watching Corey Robinson in practice and making evaluations of him. That's for Brent Key and them to do, but he's certainly not out of the rotation. And I think that if, him and Ethan are the two left tackles. If one goes down, the other one will go in. If one's struggling, if McKinney has a rough game, I think you could see Corey Robinson back in there in a heartbeat. But right now, the way Ethan's playing, I wouldn't take him out either. Kesey Moore, gosh golly, I'm happy to be here, and I love these kids. After wins last year, seems more business-like now. What's your take? Yeah, he expects to win every game now. Like, that's his MO. Before, he was just trying to repair something that was broken and piecing it back together, like with glue and whatever else he could find. I think right now he's in a very different mode. He's trying to build his program. He expects to win. His expectation is to be a team that competes for the ACC championship every year eventually. Now, they understand it's a process, that you're not going to win every game, all of those things. But the fact that they had opportunities to possibly at least be in a tie game or win the two games they lost this year, I think's probably keeping him up at night, knowing Brent the way I do. And he wants to win. And so that's why if they were 4-0, I think you might get a different personality from him a little bit, where he's a little bit happier. But I think he's a little frustrated that they let that go. Jamie Felix, either grades or some other odd situation happening, my guess. Maybe that's not our business. Both Dante injury prone and 2 to 3 deep with smallish running backs. Can you speculate? Do you care to share? I don't think there's anything wrong with Jamie Felix. He was dressed and traveling. He would not be if he was suspended or had an academic issue or anything else. I think he got passed by on the depth chart. And Evan Dickens is not a small running back. I don't know where people get that from. He's actually like one of the bigger running backs on the team. The dude's like 6 foot something tall. Like, he's not a small running back. You know, Jamal Haynes is a small guy. The walk-on Daylon Gordon's a small guy. Dante Smith's not small. Trey Cooley's not small. I don't, are they like ginormous dudes? No, but like they're not small running backs. I don't get that like at all from that. But yeah, I think Jamie's just not playing because he's not playing. He was the fourth running back on Saturday and just didn't play. They played two guys. They didn't play Evan Dickens either. So I think maybe they're trying to redshirt him. That could be very well the situation. They played him in 5 games last year, and if he's not in the rotation, why play him right now? Like, what do you gain from that? On linebacker defense, I know we don't have a true Mike. What do you think of the rotation? How would you split up the snaps for the next few games? And how do you address this in recruiting? And for Tatum, does the light ever go on? I think I talked about Tatum already, so we'll skip that part of it. I think at the Mike, you've got to keep experimenting and find what works. I think that Dre White has shown that he can play, and Kyle Eifert has shown that he can play. And Braylon Oliver as well. So I think those 3 guys need to play more, and you need to get away from Paul and Tatum, especially on run-heavy downs. And I think Dre White's just the guy who's going to be on a pitch count. He's sort of like a relief pitcher. You're going to bring him in. He's going to play your 20 snaps, 25 snaps. I don't think he's got it to play 80 snaps anymore in his body, but he can certainly give you 20 good snaps. He did that on Saturday at Wake Forest, and hopefully he can keep that up. And maybe you try to, if he can give you a little more than that, then that's fine, but you don't want to break him down either. And I think Eifert's got to play a little bit more too. All right, I'll do football in the chat here, and then we'll jump into talking hoops. Somebody asked how Jeff Collins' podcast career going on. And then fake Jeff Collins in the chat said that he's asking me to serenade him on the keyboard over there because he's crying with his millions of dollars. You think the defense just matched up better with the slow mesh offense? No, I think the defense just played better. They were playing Lane Kiffin's offense at Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin makes a lot of people look stupid. And Alabama basically beat them because they just have like 5-star dudes across the field. Like, watch Malachi Moore or like Kool-Aid McKinstry, or like those dudes just made one-on-one plays in space a lot of the time, and that broke down Ole Miss's offense. And then they were able to get penetration and kind of fluster dart a little bit. That was why they won the game. That was a talent over even Lane's ability to execute his offense with his guys. So no, I don't think that. Do you think we see Stockton this weekend? Bailey Stockton, he's been playing on special teams. Yeah, I think you might see him at receiver. You might see Zion Taylor if they can get comfortable lead. I know he's been working the X receiver a little bit. He's showed up in the depth chart there this week or last week, and he's been in there. And they've had him he's traveled and he's been kind of raring to go. I kind of like to see him play a little bit. I really like Zion. I think there's quite a few guys you could see play if they can get up a little bit. Do you think the freshman will get more burn at linebacker? So really, Jacob Cruz is probably the one that would make sense to play because he's more of the Mike type linebacker of the freshmen. I don't know. Him or Ashton Heflin could both play. They're playing both of them on special teams, so I would not be shocked to see them at some point. But I still think physically, I don't know that they're ready to play or there yet. I think they've both Ashton and Jacob need to get a little bit stronger. But I would like to see more of Eford though. And I know he reminds me a lot of these guys I've covered over the years here, Julian Burnett or PJ Davis. Not as small maybe as those guys, but just a guy who's a little undersized, a little maybe less athletic than you'd think, and can just play football. And he's shown a little bit of it already, and I think he probably could play a little bit more. What is the field goal range Key would let Burr run out there versus punting or going for it? Well, actually, it's funny at practice today. Brent and I were having a discussion about the call at the Wake 35 when they went for it on the fourth down, and if he'd thought about kicking there or not. And they basically said that they make a chart each game, and it's I think also based on how they warm up and stuff. They have a guy that charts all their kicks if you watch them warm up. And they had a comfort distance for Burr, and it was a little on the edge of that. And you don't want to get a kick block trying to really kick a super long one. You weren't really going to gain or lose anything. So why not go for the 6 yards, I think it was. So I think that made a lot of sense. So that's sort of where they're at. I think if they had gotten, on third down, I think they didn't get anything on third down. If they had picked up 3 yards, maybe they do try the long field goal there. So I'm just laughing at the chat. There's some pretty funny stuff going on there. But it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Question, do you feel like we'll start to see more vertical throws with Boyd, Leary, and Malik? It seems those balls are going almost only to Singleton. Multiple vertical concepts. They've run some of those. Haynes just not thrown them. And to be honest with you, I haven't seen a lot of those guys open. The ones that have generally been open have been more to the tight end or the back leaking out than the slots and the outside guys other than Singleton. I think Haynes really likes Singleton and Chase Lane, and those are his guys, that Z position. So maybe you'll see that that's maybe the next thing in the progression of Haynes King as a quarterback and being comfortable with the line and what they're doing is that he's able to make a little bit more of a progression through things, because he got a little too locked on Singleton a couple times, and I thought it was forcing the ball, and he'd probably tell you that too when he went back and watched the film. But it's hard not to, because that dude's super talented, so I get why he's doing it, and if you don't see him double covered over the top. Yeah, someone said that, if Burr coming off his knees that comfortable now, what is his, end game as he gets more comfortable and his knee gets healthier? And yeah, he could be a guy. I mean, they signed him for a reason. They haven't signed a lot of kickers over the years. And that's one of those boomer bust positions, and it always has been for everyone that signs them out of high school. For every Harrison Butker, there's Justin Moore, I think was his name, the other private school kid they signed that was terrible, that kicked a kickoff. I remember it went 12 yards sideways out of bounds, like a slice in a game. So yeah, there's always a lot of that stuff. The 1 year anniversary question, you saw Key wink at me. You guys also missed the beginning. I was wearing, I'm trying to think if I have an example. So do you see, if you can see the top of this pin and the color it is. I was wearing shorts like that color, and Brent goes, "You're wearing red shorts, Kelly. Why are you wearing red shorts to a media avail?" I was like, "Man, it's like I haven't done laundry in too long. Like I was just grabbing stuff," and I said, "It's not red. It's more like pink." And he said that I believe it was something to the effect of, "Are you Ray Charles? Are you colorblind?" So yeah, that was pretty funny. Brent and I always have a lot of fun, and I gave him a heads up that I was going to ask him the anniversary question because I felt like I didn't want him, because I seriously figured he didn't know, and he didn't know that it was the anniversary of it, so I wanted to give him a second to think about it. But yeah, Brent and I always have some pretty fun back and forths at the either at practice or the media thing. All right, we're like almost 30 minutes in. Let's shift and talk a little bit about basketball. So we met with Damon Stoudemire today. Damon's kind of this guy. If you ask him a question about specific people, he'll talk. He had some talking points, I think, in his mind that he want to talk about. Obviously, the Miles Kelly thing, jumping out saying he wants him to be an All-American. I agree with him as a guy that can shoot 44% from three consistently, and he's had like a couple of dud weeks that have thrown off his numbers. If you go look, if you go look at like his numbers, like you take out like two bad games or whatever, like he starts getting in that 40% plus 3-point range really easily. Like if you just took one bad game out from last year. And I think that Miles is really talented scorer, and they just have struggled to get him in a consistent space in the old offense that we all hated watching, including myself. And I think that Damon's going to try to prioritize getting the ball in space. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see if Miles how he embraces that, how he plays. He still needs to work on his ability to drive the basket and finish a little bit. That was always very inconsistent with him last year. I'm sure that's something that Damon's working on. He didn't talk about Debo Coleman. He didn't talk about what he talked about Debo in sort of a generalized thing when he was asked about him. I think Debo's a guy that they want to see step up. I think him and Kwasi Reeves were probably just not mentioned because they weren't at the top of his mind for whatever reason. He talked about very specific guys he wanted to mention. Really started with the guard play, the point guard-ish play with Kyle, with Amari Abram, and with Lance Terry. And then those are sort of your three like primary ball handlers. And those guys are going to play a lot. And Lance Terry apparently has just been killer on both over the summer. Just had a great summer and really has developed. And I think the style of play really fits him. So he's a guy that's going to be sort of, maybe a sixth man for them or something. I think he's going to play really well. Looking at the rest of the team, he didn't talk about Ebenezer. He didn't talk about Tyjon Claude. Didn't talk about a lot of people. So I think that I'm not reading anything into it. We didn't ask him about. I didn't ask him about big man. I didn't ask him about anything. He just Bane and Dago and Amari and Miles were sort of the top of mind guys he mentioned. So those are the guys that I'm going to be interested in seeing, and hopefully maybe they'll open up a practice or something so we can go in there and see what it's like. Usually that happens, so I'm hopeful. The big thing today was the schedule got dropped. They open with the exhibition with Clark Atlanta on November 1st, which is like a Wednesday. Is that right? What is it? It's Wednesday, November 1st at the Camish. And Georgia Southern week 2, Howard, UMass Lowell. So they should be 3-0 with an exhibition win as well, going into the trip to Cincinnati on November 22nd. There's still some stuff missing. So like the Hoops Giving game's not on here with Penn State. That's supposed to be December 17th, I think it is. And there's something else I think maybe missing. I haven't counted up the non-conference games. I feel like something's missing between UMass Lowell and this trip to Cincinnati, maybe. Because that's a Tuesday. There's no Saturday game that week, or no weekend game or anything. I don't know. I can't. I'm having a hard time remembering how the non-conference stuff works. So, but yeah, I'm like pissed about the Cincinnati game because I wish that was like a week later because I would go instead of Mississippi. I wish they'd flipped that in the Mississippi State game. Obviously, Mississippi State will be an interesting game. So those two are kind of big early swing games. You get Duke to open ACC play because, of course, they do. Georgia Tech, I think, opened last year with UNC. Like, it's sort of comical at this point. Then they go to Georgia. Who knows what Georgia's like? Alabama, A&M, and then the trip out to Hawaii that I wanted to go to but can't right now because of family stuff. And then they're off when they get back from Hawaii until Florida State. It'll be interesting. The first half, that stretch from Cincinnati through the tournament in Hawaii is going to be difficult. Play UMass and Portland and Hawaii should win. But you got Cincinnati on the road. You have Mississippi State, Duke here at Georgia. Those are 4 pretty tough games. Then you go back and things kind of lighten up a little bit. You go at Florida State, who I think is a little bit of a mess right now, and this might be Leonard Hamilton's last season. Boston College, Notre Dame, both here, both winnable games. Then you go to Duke, which will be a tough game. They go to Clemson, which has been a tough game traditionally for Georgia Tech. Virginia here, which will be a tough game. Pitt here, I don't know how many 27-year-old guys Pitt has on their team this year, so I'm still kind of learning. Still not ready to learn rosters yet. At Virginia Tech, Carolina here, which will be an interesting game. At NC State the following week, Wake Forest. They play the 3 of the 4 Carolina teams all in a row. At Louisville, which should be a win, is their complete dumpster fire again. At Notre Dame, which should be a win. Syracuse here, which is another sort of dumpster fire team. Clemson here, which they usually play them better in Atlanta. At Miami will be interesting because Larinaga is a good coach, and I'm sure he's been spending money and has a team again. Florida State here, which should be another win. At Wake Forest, which is a toss-up. At Virginia, which is probably a loss. It's tough playing at Virginia to end the season in back-to-back road games for the last 2 games of the season going into the ACC tournament, which this year is in Washington, D.C. As I look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. See, like 14, 15 games. I'm like pretty confident Georgia Tech will win. And then probably another 8 that are sort of toss-up games, and then some that are, I think Duke and Carolina will be very difficult. And, there's a lot of teams we don't know much about yet, like NC State. Are they really building their team around DJ Burns? Is that like that was what the talking head was saying on the ACC show, and I was like, it seems weird to build your team around a guy who's like a kind of fat dude like me. Like I don't think this is like what I would build my team around, but whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen there. Jumping into the question. For hoops questions. Curious your thoughts on the basketball team on the level of talent and coaching staff. What do I think of the roster and the coaching staff? I think the roster is pretty well. They've done a pretty good job, like filling it out. I think I really like the guys they picked up. I would like to have maybe a more experienced, talented big man at this level. But again, that's been like a rub here for a while, trying to find those guys in the portal. You're trying to just find what you can because there's a run. That's like the one position that's very difficult. It's sort of like quarterbacks in the football portal, finding one that's experienced and ready to go. And not, it's like Georgia Tech took a chance on Haynes King, right? Like this year in football, and it's working out. And other teams took a chance on some other dude that had maybe a similar background to Haynes King, and it's not. And that's the thing with big men. You're rolling the dice a little bit, so they're rolling the dice on Ebenezer and Tyjon Claude that they can get it done, and one of the young guys. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think he put together a pretty good staff. He talked about that a little bit today. He said that he wanted younger guys. Guys are hungry. His recruiting guys, too. He sort of knew their kind of MO of like being guys that help build programs. They brought in Carl Hobbs as just a veteran guy to be like that presence, and then he brought in two young NBA guys to round out the two other spots to kind of give some of that pro piece to the program. I thought it made a lot of sense. Um, uh, uh, Miles Kelly over under 17 points game. I'll take the over on that one. Um, I think I think he's going to be like in the top probably 10 in scoring in the ACC. I don't remember what that was a year ago, but I think it's going to be a good year for Miles Kelly. I think this offense fits him well as long as he's shooting the ball okay and stays healthy. I think he's got a chance to be over that 17 points per game. He certainly showed it in the back end. He was averaging 20 something points a game in the final huge stretch of games they had. Where does Georgia Tech finish in the ACC? I think if you get to 10, I think that should be the sort of the goal bar right now with the roster they have and looking around the league. I think 10's a pretty good spot that gets you probably into the NIT. If you have a good season, then who knows what's going to happen. Someone asked if they're going to go dancing in March. If Damon does that, then he's ACC Coach of the Year probably. Like I don't know who else would get it. So if he gets them dancing, that's awesome. But people need to not put like crazy expectations in year one. All right, let me go and find some other questions. And I'll kind of jump back. Some people asked a few other football questions. We'll jump back at the end and get on that. Thoughts on his comments about Debo when asked? Sounds like he had some lazy habits, the way coach responded. I think Debo's been a guy that needs to be healthy and focused. And it seems like Damon certainly picked up on that. And I think he's a really talented dude. He's the one guy like I've been kind of waiting to break through, and probably it was a little bit of a killer that he didn't for Josh. And I think Damon's a guy that's going to demand that. And if he doesn't, he's going to be a guy that I would see moving on after the season. If he can't get himself in the rotation, I would think he'd be close to graduating by the end of the year. So it's going to be a lot on Debo to kind of step up, especially with having a guard heavy team. And if you have these athletic dudes like that can come and play, your minutes that are longer and more gifted than you, like where are your minutes coming from? Because Kwasi Reeves or Tafara or like some of the other dudes could come in and jump and take those minutes. And so he's got to be exceptional scoring. He's got to be good on defense and not a fouling machine, which he had a little bit of trouble with. I answered the top half of the conference thing. And it's a pretty high bar for Damon in year one, but there's a fake Josh Pastner in the chat. He mentioned Bay. What have you heard? I think he's had a really good preseason, and they're very excited about Bay and Ndongo. And he's kind of a freaky dude. That's one they kind of stole from Rutgers. And I think they're really excited about his sort of upside. Now, don't confuse like him being excited about him with, hey, this is a dude that's going to be like 15-10 or something as a freshman. Like that's temper the expectations a little bit there, but really gifted kind of all around bigger player. So I'm excited about him. I thought about live stream commentary during a football game? No, because I'm at the game, so it's like I don't know how you would do that and it'd be obnoxious as hell to everyone in the press box. I like watching the game and not talking about it so much, or just making snide comments in the press box or kind of jokes or whatever. I feel like if I'm like having to do the commentary, I'm not going to be like focused on what's happening. It was the same thing. I tried to take pictures for a few years. I had a dude named Alex that was or Alexi that was helping me, and Alexi, or Alex. Anyways, I went down and shot on the field, shot photos during for a season, and it was like terrible. I didn't wasn't seeing the game. I was focused on the wrong things, and so I think that I think that um, I couldn't do a commentary. I've thought about rewatching the game, but that sounds like hell to me. Like rewatch a whole game. Maybe I could watch like the condensed game and give you like some play by play. Eventually, I would like to build this up enough where we could have like somebody um, do a watch along, and but it won't be me. I don't want to do that myself, but that's the end game in all of this. We're trying to build something slowly, piece by piece here at Jackets Online. This is far from the end game of this, folks. So that's why I always tell people, tell your friends about the site, get them to subscribe, get them to subscribe to the YouTube channel. All those things help me build out this business. I'm constantly reinvesting in the business. Advertise with us if you have a business that's Georgia Tech friendly or something that makes sense. All of those things help us. So I appreciate everyone for joining me tonight. And look forward to hopefully having good news on Saturday for the Jackets. And thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.